What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Learning Culture Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Barry, and this is a special edition episode called Good to Great ICs. ICs stands for individual contributors. Now, why individual contributors? Because I think they are becoming an increasingly important role in companies of the future. There is increasing evidence every single day about how ICs are able to make more impact on their own thanks to AI, and how they are actually learning management skills to manage AI agents. In this edition of the podcast, we talk to leaders about what it really takes to grow as an individual contributor. So, whether you're an IC yourself looking for advice to grow your career, or you're responsible for developing ICs, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Whitney, welcome to the show.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so welcome to Good to Great ICs. You are now the Director of Revenue Enablement at Aptera, but before that, you've had a long career as an individual contributor, and then you worked your way up to managing teams of contractors and then much larger teams, and now in this director role. And what I'm looking to get from this conversation is just what your experience was like as an IC, and also now that you are responsible for developing people, how you think about developing ICs.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Um, I think when I started my career, I started in education and made the transition from teaching to coaching and designing and facilitating district-wide workshops for teachers. And that's really where I found my passion for designing training and learning experiences. And from there, I went on to develop science curriculum at UC Berkeley and spent a couple years there developing and curriculum that ended up going to a publishing company, and that was a grant funded position. So that when that was done, I made my transition into technical curriculum development. So I had a background in education, and when I went from academia to tech, it was a little bit of a shift. There were some growing pains for me, and I think early in my career, I thought that if I just executed flawlessly, if I just built strong programs, delivered polished trainings, and hit deadlines, that the impact would speak for itself. But what really changed everything for me was understanding that visibility, alignment, and stakeholder influence are just as critical as the execution piece.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like any. Um, I speak from my own perspective as an entrepreneur. Like, you can do really great work, but if you're not telling people that you do great work, you don't get the word out there, And so it's a very similar type of thing. You can be really strong at executing, and that some people will notice, but you also got to be good at building relationships and aligning people in the direction that you see things going. So it's really interesting that you learned that.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
right. And
yeah, no, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's like when I had that mindset shift and I started asking, how does this tie to revenue? What business metric moves if this works? And especially who needs to believe in this for it to
Yeah,
scale?
oh,
Like
yeah.
that's when my career really accelerated. I had to shift from that individual contributor mindset to, from task owner to business partner. And that completely changed how I showed up. So I stopped
Mhm,
thinking like a program builder and started thinking more like a strategic partner.
mhm. That's who needs to believe in this. That's a really cool question to keep in mind. Yeah. Okay, so what's an aha moment you had during your time as an IC that really just changed how you showed up in your work?
Yeah, I think so. In my first role at UC Berkeley, when I was hired there, I was hired by a woman who had a PhD from Cal, and the majority of my peers had PhDs or degrees from Ivy League schools. And at that time, I was in the middle of working on my master's, and I had a bachelor's degree from Southern Illinois. So I was a little bit intimidated when I first started working there. And I remember the woman that hired me sat me down. We were in a think tank in these big rooms with whiteboards all around, and we would throw out ideas and bounce ideas off of each other. In the beginning, I was kind of quiet. I kind of held back and just listened. And I remember she pulled me aside one day and she said, Whitney, I want to know what you think. And she said, I hired you for a reason. You deserve to be here. You deserve a seat at the table. And one of the reasons I hired you is because you ask really insightful questions. So, what I want you to do is when people throw out suggestions, I want you to poke holes in it. I want you to push back. I want you to ask questions and challenge it. That's why I hired you. So, it really took, having a leader that I admired and respected, helping me see my value. At the time I was, in my mid 20s. I was young. I grew up in a small farming community in Southern Illinois and moved out to San Francisco. And so it was a big shift for me, but having someone that believed in me and helped me see my own value, and that really helped build my confidence. And I think, on that same note, as when I initially started, with that mindset of I just need to build and, meet deadlines and do what's asked, when I shift my mindset to how, I ultimately shift my mindset to more of a strategic partner. And from that, I was able to build global onboarding programs and lead post-merger enablement transformations. And so it made a big difference. And then after Cal, I got a job as a curriculum developer at Salesforce. And I have a similar story there. I went through 8 rounds of interviews, and the last couple interviews were challenges and panel presentations. And I remember after I was hired, I asked the hiring manager, "Why did you hire me? Why me?" I'm sure you had plenty of other candidates who had a background in tech, and my background is in academia. And he said, same thing. He said, because you ask the right questions, you ask insightful questions. And he said, it's not just about your skills and experience, it's about being curious and being, open-minded, being curious, asking insightful questions, because that's what you're going to do when you start building these programs and content. You're going to have to work with these cross-functional teams, and asking questions is how you're going to strategically, build alignment across the organization. And so it was really kind of an eye-opening experience that I had. 2 managers from 2 different organizations give me the same feedback.
Yeah. And it's incredible what impact a mentor can have as well, where that first person gave you the permission to ask those questions, and then from there you just trusted your own curiosity. It's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking back from where at your younger version of yourself, right, and from where you are now, what piece of advice would you whisper in young Whitney's ear if you could go back?
I love this question. I think I would whisper, you don't need permission to think bigger. 'Cause like I said, for a long time, I saw my job as delivering what was asked of me. I didn't always feel empowered to challenge assumptions or reframe problems. But the leaders who trusted me the most were the ones who valued when I said, I see things differently. I think there's a more scalable way to approach this. Here's the data, and we can reduce ramp time, but we need to redesign the system. So, for example, when in my most recent role, we reduced onboarding ramp time from 4 months to 6 weeks after a major merger. And it wasn't because we worked harder, it was because we were willing to question the structure and then iterate the program 3 times.
Yeah, I think that's basically you passing on what your mentor did, right? Back to yourself, and it's something that all of us can do to the people that work for us. It's
Yeah,
very
exactly. I
cool.
think, it's like we're not just here to execute, we're here to shape the system. And
Yeah,
that mindset shift really unlocks leadership.
yeah. Shape the system, and we're all part of that. We're co-creating that system. Yeah. Okay, last question then. So, when you spot a high potential today, right, high potential individual contributor today, we all know, we can all spot them, right? What's the first thing you try to develop in them?
I think the one of the first things I try to develop it when I see a high potential I see is business acumen, and then like that narrative ownership. So high performers, they usually already have like their craft mastered, whether they're strong facilitators or they're strong analysts or strong builders of content. But I think like what separates future leaders is whether they can connect their work to the revenue and customer outcomes, whether they're able to anticipate cross-functional friction. That's a big one, right? Because you're working
Hmm.
with many teams. And oftentimes at the intersection of enablement and L&D, you're bringing all these cross-functional teams together to work on an initiative, and you realize as you're bringing them together that there may be misalignment. And so a lot of it is like being able to anticipate that friction and get ahead of it,
Mhm.
to keep momentum going on the project, and then also, communicate their impact in a compelling executive ready narrative. So I
Mm.
coach them to stop reporting activities and start articulating the outcome.
Yeah, yeah. That shift from input to output focus is I hear this a lot now, and I have one follow up on this because you have three global regions, I think, right? That you work in primarily at Aptura. Is that correct?
Yeah, three
Yeah,
global regions, and that spans, North America, EMEA, and APAC.
yeah. And so, with that lens, how do you adapt for different contexts? When you're trying to like land it in different ways. Like what have you learned about that? What we just discovered, how would you adapt that for different audiences?
That's a great question. I think, depending on the region, the culture, right, you have to, there are considerations that you have to make in adapting the content. Um, One example I can give is that the L&D team delivered a series of trainings, and for managers, and their experience was that when they were delivering those trainings in APAC, there wasn't quite as much engagement in terms of folks asking questions and being willing to speak up. And I think, culturally there is a high regard for authority, and the org structure is taken very
Mhm.
seriously. And so oftentimes ICs maybe in those regions would wait and to see what their manager or what
Mhm.
an executive would say first before contributing. So you just kind of adapt that and design questions that are thought provoking. Or in that instance, for example, she did breakout. She was strategic about the groups that she paired people with in breakouts. So the
Mhm.
ICs were together in one group, so they felt like they could discuss and
Yeah.
ask questions without having to wait and see what the executive or the leader in that session was saying first. So that,
Mm.
just small like nuances, and being mindful and understanding of those, I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really concrete advice, and so relevant in today's global, with all companies being so global. Yeah, I think we've covered all my questions. So this has been such a great conversation, Whitney. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. Thanks for having me.